Hello, hoopheads, and happy March from the Jersey Jump Shot, the first and only podcast dedicated exclusively to college basketball in the Garden State. I'm Jerry Carino, and co-host Steve Ellison and I are straying just a bit outside of our normal parameters today to feature a Jersey guy who is doing something really impressive in Western Pennsylvania. Andy Toole was born in Red Bank and played high school ball at Christian Brothers Academy, where he won a lot of games. And then he helped Penn as a college player reach 2 NCAA tournaments. He became head coach at Robert Morris at age 29 in 2010. In 15 seasons at the helm, Andy has guided the Colonials to 5 conference titles, including 4 in the Northeast Conference and now in the Horizon League. After finishing 6-14 in the league last year, his Colonials are 15-5 and 23-8 overall. They opened the Horizon League tournament Thursday in the quarterfinals. Andy, welcome to Jersey Jump Shot, and welcome back to your roots.
Really happy to be here. And we're Pennsylvania's a border state, so you're not going too far outside.
That's right. You're still technically in the Northeast. And let's talk about the job you've done at Robert Morris this year, what the Colonials have achieved. How have you turned it around so dramatically from last season?
You know, I think there's a number of things that, some good recruiting, some good fortune. After last season, we were disappointed in how our team came together. We were really unable to defend and rebound at the level you need to be competitive in the Horizon League. And so when we went out to recruit, we wanted to identify some guys that would be able to do those things, defend, rebound, play with the necessary edge and competitiveness that it takes to be successful. And as we got the guys together last summer, we thought we had some of the ingredients necessary to make a really good team and compete for a championship. As this year's gone on, we've gotten better and better and better. Guys have really responded to any challenge that's been put in front of them. The handful of games early on where we didn't perform quite as well, guys were really great about, looking at that film honestly and then trying to make the necessary adjustments. And, as the year's gone on, our team has just become more and more connected, played with a great sense of pride. And that's allowed us, I think, to win some of the close games we've won.
Andy, what's your philosophy on building a mid-major program kind of in this era of free agency, and how has that changed over your years?
It's changed a lot. I think when I first became a head coach 15 years ago, kids just starting to transfer up. We had 4 years in a row where we lost our leading scorer to, Georgetown, Clemson, Nebraska. And it was really impossible to replace those guys because the transfer portal did not exist yet. So you were losing a guy who was, a 15, 16 point a game scorer, and you were trying to replace him with a high school kid or a junior college kid that you didn't really know if they could do the job at that level. And so now, at least with the transfer portal, you can go out and you can find some guys that have Division I experience, have produced some stats. It's still hard because the recruiting process isn't quite as long. You don't always know everybody as well as you used to when you were recruiting guys as juniors in high school, getting to know their family, getting to know them, watching them multiple times with their AAU team, their high school team, et cetera. So you're really trying to deep dive into these guys in a few weeks. And so you got to be fortunate. There's been guys in the last couple of years that we've taken out of the transfer portal that haven't been what we thought they would be. This year, we were pretty fortunate with the guys we were able to get. I think the roles that we identified for the people that we brought in were the exact abilities that they had, and they've gone out and they've executed in that world. But it's certainly, you got to be a little bit fortunate to be able to have things fall into place like they have for us this year.
Steve Peichel has been on with us, and he's called it speed dating as opposed to traditional recruiting, right? You have to make real speed assessments when you're looking at guys in the portal. That's a pretty interesting way to look at it, for sure. What was the transition like, Andy, from the Northeast Conference to the Horizon? This is now your 5th season in that league.
It's been a challenge. I think anytime you go from, one of the lowest ranked leagues in the country to a legitimate mid-major league, there's going to be some improvements that need to be made, and the timing that we made the move in probably might not have been the best. We announced we were going to change leagues in June of the pandemic, right? We had just won the Northeast Conference Championship in March of 2020. And then in June of 2020, we decided we're going to go into the Horizon League. And the first 2 years, we weren't allowed to leave campus to recruit. So we weren't able to really go out and, meet with people, sit down with people face-to-face, be able to evaluate them live. So it was a challenge. And, we struggled those first couple years. I thought in our 3rd year in the league, we kind of had made some headway. We finished 6th in the league and thought we were trending in the right direction. And then last year, we had a little bit of a disappointing year. We kind of slid back. And so, there was a great level of urgency from, our staff and our program to kind of get us back into that championship chase that we had been so accustomed to in the Northeast Conference. But, we had to get bigger. We had to get more athletic. We had to get stronger. We had to get better across the board. And I think, we've been able to find a group of guys that, like I mentioned, starting this summer, we knew they had great competitiveness and pride. And that's kind of initially was a little bit of individual pride, and now it's become a collective pride.
Yeah, you were 29 when you became a Division I head coach. How have you changed as a head coach over that time?
The 15 years that I've been a head coach, there's been such dramatic change in college athletics. It's been crazy, and I was really fortunate to get hired at 29. And speaking of Jersey roots, the president that hired me was a guy named Greg DeLama, who grew up in Rumson, went to RFH, and now is retiring as the president at Rider. But he was, pretty bold, I think, in giving a 29-year-old the opportunity to be a head coach, Division I. Mike Rice, who also has his Jersey roots, is who I worked for here. And, Mike, was pushing really hard for me to get the opportunity. And, I was scared as hell, to be honest with you. You're standing up there for the first time. You're entrusted with, running this program that has just gone to the NCAA tournament. And you're trying to do everything you can to keep the thing going. And, but I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot. I've gotten smarter at being able to pick my spots. The first couple of years are an emotional roller coaster. You run a great play and you think you're never going to lose. And then all of a sudden you turn the ball over and you think you're getting fired tomorrow. So, you really run the gamut of the emotions. But, over time, you start to understand what comes with a season, what comes with the highs and lows of it, and how to kind of maintain maybe a steady outlook so you can kind of make good decisions during the course of the season.
You mentioned the Jersey roots and Mike Rice. Is the story of you getting Rice's attention that you guys met on a schoolyard on a playground and for a pickup game in Middletown, and you kicked his butt on the court? How true is that? Tell me about that, Andy.
So it was Normandy Park in Middletown, and I was in college. He was probably in his early 30s, maybe. And he claims that he was running the court before I got there. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but Mike never really let, the facts get in the way of a good story. Right. So me and a couple of my buddies show up, and, in typical Mike fashion, there's a lot of, stuff being talked back and forth, and a lot of arguing over calls. And, him and I might've exchanged some words, and I didn't really know who he was at the time. Right. And we ended up kind of taking over the court and going on a run. And, he left, probably arguing or complaining about something. And then about 2 years later, I met him down at Hoop Group headquarters. And he was like, oh, he came up and he introduced himself. I'm Mike Rice. And I'm like, oh, you're the jerk that was at the court about 3 years ago when I saw you in Normandy. So that was kind of the start of our relationship. Yeah.
And it goes back to the Hoop Group too, which is funny. Another place you worked, another Jersey connection for sure.
Yep.
All right. I want to ask you about 2020. You alluded to this. You guys won the NEC tournament only to have the world shut down right before the big dance. What was that like for you and your program? You were on your way, right? That had to be rough. What was that like, and how do you even recover from that?
Yeah, it was awful. I think one of the things, if you talk to a lot of coaches across the country, one of the reasons they do this is to help provide, an opportunity for their players to be a part of the NCAA tournament, right? I played for Fran Dunphy at Penn, and he would always say there's no better sound than hearing your name called on Selection Sunday. And so that team in 2020 was determined to win a championship. We had lost in the semifinals the year prior, came back with a lot of good players, a lot of returning players, and they went on a great run. And we won that game on a Tuesday night. We had a sold-out arena here at Robert Morris, 4,000 fans there, played an unbelievable game. And then Wednesday, Rudy Gobert, I think, tested positive for COVID. They shut the NBA games down. Thursday afternoon, they canceled the NCAA tournament. And we had a meeting Friday morning, and it was like walking into a funeral. I mean, it was just the grief and the depression that you could just sense on the guys was unbelievable. And we tried to, try to make it as positive. Hey, you guys won your championship. There are a lot of leagues that didn't get to finish a championship. You guys are champions. You had this unbelievable memory of winning the Northeast Conference Championship in front of a sold-out arena, but it still didn't take away the sting. And the hard part was almost as soon as that meeting happened the next week, everybody was sent home. So we couldn't even really celebrate as a group, right? And you didn't get a chance to, get together and celebrate the success they had. And, so it was really hard. And then we went from that, right into the Horizon League where, you're swimming upstream and you're fighting for your life, at a time where you're not sure what's happening on a day-to-day basis. So, it definitely was a challenge. And that's why I think it's so, gratifying in some ways to be back in the hunt, for a championship here in the Horizon League, because you almost feel like that experience was robbed from you in 2020.
It's interesting. That was such a transitional, such a tough time. But 2013 Kentucky, I think, was when everyone kind of looked at your program and really put it on the map. Talk about that and beating Kentucky at home in the NIT and that whole experience and kind of your lasting memories of that.
It's the beauty of sports, really, is what it is, we had a really good team in 2013. We had a bunch of seniors. Again, we got upset in the semifinals of the conference tournament. And I know you guys talked to a lot of coaches in one bid leagues, man. Those conference tournaments are so difficult and anything can happen. And so we get upset in the semifinals after going maybe 15-3 in the league. And just, again, another group of guys that were determined to get back to the tournament. And we get upset, guys are distraught. And all of a sudden we get wind that we're going to have, Kentucky in Moon Township at Robert Morris with John Calipari, who's a Moon native, coming back.
That's right.
To play here. And they had just won the national championship in 2012, has struggled in 2013, but they still had Willie Cauley-Stein, who played in the NBA, Kyle Wolcher, who played in the NBA, Nerlens Noel was on that team, Archie Goodwin. I mean, they had a really star-studded, team. And we had a group of seniors, and we had lost that year at Xavier by a point. We had gone down to Arkansas and lost by 5 points. And these guys always said, man, if we could ever get a high major team to come play us at our place, we could beat one of these teams. We could win the game. And the environment around the game was crazy. 2 hours before the game, the gym was completely sold out.
Wow.
The 3 days leading up to the game, or 2 days leading up to the game, Kentucky fans, Big Blue Nation was calling every campus extension they could find to try and get tickets. It was nuts. And the game started, and we started out 10-0. I mean, you couldn't even hear yourself think. It was like so loud. And I think we probably had about 3,600 people in our building, and to this day, I think I've met about 10,000 that tell me they were there. It was like an old school like summer league game. By the end of the game, people were just like standing on the baselines 2-3 deep. The environment was amazing, and we ended up winning that game 59-57, and kind of took everybody's attention from the NCAA tournament, which was going to start a couple days later.
Yep.
And brought it to the NIT because it was such a unique story.
That's cool.
Very nice. It's interesting because at that level, there's always the debate, home court or neutral site tournament. I know you talked about you guys got knocked off in the tournament that year. What do you prefer? Any thoughts on that?
It's you want to be in it first and foremost, but some of the home courts that I've been able to be a part of in conference tournaments at this level have been incredible. We played a championship game at St. Francis, Brooklyn, and man, that was like, playing in a bandbox. We played a championship game at Quinnipiac. We've had championship games here at Robert Morris, semifinal games here in those places. And it's like the environment, the energy is hard to replicate at a neutral site. And I get when you're the big boys and you got 19,000 going to Madison Square Garden, or, you have these, awesome environments at the high major level, but for mid-major, low major, I think it's hard to beat those on-campus games. They're pretty unique environments to be a part of.
Agree. You mentioned a few minutes ago Fran Dunphy, who announced his impending retirement. What was it like playing for him? What did you take from him that you use in your own coaching?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I love playing for him. I mean, he's as competitive a coach as you're ever going to come across, and that really, I understood that language really well, and so we got along great. And the thing that's so great about Dunph is he just keeps it so simple, right? He keeps the main thing. You got to take care of the ball. You got to play as hard as you can. You got to defend as hard as you can, and you got to take good shots. And he wants his better players taking most of the shots, and he doesn't overcomplicate it with some X and O strategy. He's not trying to change defensive coverages game to game, right? He's inspiring his team. He's motivating his team to play the game the right way, to find the best shot you possibly can, to take care of that basketball and to defend your butt off. And that's been a great recipe for him for his career.
Andy, just quickly touching on your Jersey Shore roots. I mean, you played at CBA, and so many guys you knew from that era are coaching and doing well, from Jeff Billett at CBA, Brian Lynch at St. Rose, Taj Holden at Ranny. I'm curious how close you kind of watch it and keep an eye on things here in CBA and some of the guys you know.
I mean, I follow it a ton, I constantly, I come back, my in-laws live in Ocean Township. Mark Kelly used to be the coach of Middletown South as my father-in-law. And so, him and my two brother-in-laws kind of keep me up to date with what's going on the shore. And, there's been a number of guys that I played with. Kevin Cullen used to be the coach of Middletown South. I played with when I was young. And Mike Iasparo, I played against growing up. And obviously Jeff and Brian and Taj. Taj was an AAU teammate of mine. Brian and Jeff obviously were older than me at CBA, but played with and against them forever. Todd Billett is my age, so Jeff's younger brother. So it's all kind of incestuous, and everybody knows everybody. And I come back to Manasquan every summer and go to the beach in August. And the last couple of summers, I've gotten together with, it's funny. It's actually now like kids. So Brian has a son who's similar age to my sons.
Right.
Taj has a son who's similar age. Dave Klatsky, who's the coach at NYU, he has a son. So all these now we all have sons that are. Tim Begley has a son who's close to my age. So all of us kind of, keep in touch in that way and follow and, keep an eye on what's going on at the shore and have great memories from my time playing in the shore conference, playing in the JSBL, playing pickup games at Belmar Rec Center, doing all those kind of things with all the good players that were at the shore at that time. And, I thought it was a great era for shore conference basketball, the late 80s, early 2000s. There were some really good teams and really good players.
And I want to ask you about Dave Klatsky specifically. You mentioned him. What do you think of the job he's done at NYU? I mean, they could win the Division III national title this month.
Yeah, he's absolutely killing it. When they came out here to play Carnegie Mellon, who's in Pittsburgh, and I took my older son to go watch the game and get to spend some time with Dave. And I'm on a couple of different group chats with him, with some Penn guys, with some Jersey guys, and everybody's following along with his team. And his team plays unbelievable offense. He does a great job of coaching them. They have some really good talent. He's been able to get some, high major transfers. Got a kid from Virginia who's one of his best players, and he's doing an awesome job. So everybody's rooting for him, and everyone knew, obviously he'd go into it with a great analytical approach. His math skills are on full display. As he's breaking down all the analytics associated with the game today, and he's done an incredible job in his first couple of years.
There was something in the water in the Jersey Shore that era, Steve. That's for sure. And it's going to be an exciting month for our local Shore Conference alums who are now doing big things as coaches. We'll be watching. Andy Toole, thank you so much. Good luck to Robert Morris, and we hope to check in with you again at the big dance.
Anytime, guys. Would love to come back.
All right. That's great stuff. Good to hear from Andy. Steve, I know you followed his career for a long time. And, really, you got to love when you see someone like that grow into the coach he's become, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember back in the early 2000s going down to Penn every year, late in the season when those guys were, cruising. They went to the NCAA tournament 3 straight years, I believe. So, he's been at it a long time and is doing a great job.
Big weekend coming up for Robert Morris. See if they can finish the deal. And as you mentioned, that these coaches do love that playing on that home court, right? I mean, you earn something for your regular season success when you're on your home courts, and when you're in an antiseptic environment as a mid-major, it's just not as good.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why in mid-major leagues like the NEC, the regular season is so important. Every game.
Yep, and that matters. Okay, so good luck to Andy. We appreciate him coming on. It's good to go down memory lane there. Boy, it's impressive what people have gone on to achieve from that era. All right, let's talk what's going on in Jersey now. Less rosy times within the Garden State's borders, at least at the Division I level. I want to start with Steve Rutgers' gut punch against Michigan, and Steve Pikiell's, meltdown, for lack of a better word, afterwards. 3 F-bombs in his post-game radio interview in a span of like 10 seconds. And I have to tell you, I thought that he didn't realize he was on the air at first. I'm like, oh, man. And I think Jerry Recco thought the same thing. Like, Steve doesn't realize he's on the air. He's mic'd up because they're not in the same place. Like, Steve's down in the locker room, I think, when they're on the road. When they're at home, he comes over and talks to them, I think, in person. But on the road, they sort of mic him up from the locker room. And I'm like, no, there's no way he realizes he's on. Because Steve, he's like, listen, off camera, off the podium. He's like the rest of us, right? I mean, he's certainly capable of using colorful language. And I've been at practices where he's talked up a blue streak. It's not his MO. It's not like his default setting, but he's certainly capable of dropping an F-bomb. But however, never in an interview setting has he remotely gone there. You've never even really seen him get angry, Steve, in 9 years after games. So what was your reaction to that whole?
Well, I think it's a little peek behind the curtain, right? I mean, listen, there's a lot of pressure right now as this thing is going. I mean, you come into the season as a preseason top 25, two of the best freshmen in the country, and things are going this way. You know, I just think it's a sign of what's going on. You know, they're really struggling to get this turned around and quick, and it's not going that great.
Correct. I think there was a confluence of things going on there. One is, as you alluded to, the pressure has built up and finally sort of burst in Steve's mind, and that created a very out-of-character moment, right? And two, there was a game that they should have won. I mean, they outplayed Michigan. They outplayed Michigan on the road. They had Michigan, they're back against the wall. And, of course, you know, Michigan was going to make their run. I mean, they're top 25 team at home. Of course they were going to make their run. But the way Rutgers lost the game on a 28-foot shot, you know, I think, and I was watching, I like to watch the coaches' reactions, like when you get on the sidelines when there's buzzer beaters, you know, and Dusty May pulled a Jay Wright, like didn't move at all, all he did was turn to shake hands. And then Steve put his hands on his head. His hands like reflexively went to his head like this. It was just like, that reflex was like, oh my God, what else can go wrong this season? And so it was real. And Rutgers has played better. They were coming off 2 straight wins. They played a really good game at Michigan. They've played better. It's too late for them, obviously, to earn an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. But they're finally healthy. Things have finally started to round out to what he had foreseen for this team. And unfortunately, it's just too late right now.
Yeah, and I just don't think you've seen enough consistency to say this team is going to go into the Big Ten tournament and be able to put it together, you know, multiple nights and be able to make a run against a collection of teams like they're going to have to face there.
What I would say is the caveat to that, Steve, is I think Rutgers can beat anybody in the tournament in a one-game setting. In Indianapolis, neutral court, although, you know, those Midwestern teams like Purdue will be well represented there. I think Rutgers could beat anybody in a one-off in that tournament. At Michigan State, Purdue, Michigan, obviously, anybody. The question is, can they win 2 or 3 of those games in a row? And you haven't seen that. I mean, they've beaten some lower tier teams. You haven't seen that consistency from them. So you'd have to say, I'd have to believe it. I'd have to see it to believe it from them, which is why very likely they're headed to the college basketball crown, which is a consolation tournament. We'll get into that. It's a poorly conceived consolation tournament that begins on March 31st in Las Vegas. We'll get into that later, but that's just dumb. But speaking of dumb, you know, I have a bone to pick with the Big Ten officiating. And while it wasn't the sole reason Rutgers lost that game, the home whistle in the Big Ten is so bad. It's so pronounced, Steve. Like there's a study, Sports Illustrated, back when it was actually Good Magazine a few years back, had a study. They did like an in-depth thing on the home court advantage. Is it real? And what they found is in college basketball, there was empirical evidence that home crowds influence the officiating, right? But as someone who covers the Big East and the Big Ten, nowhere is that more pronounced than in the Big Ten. Like it's so lopsided for the home team. And we've seen Rutgers get the benefit of those calls plenty of times. In the previous game against USC, they shot double the free throws the Trojans did in Piscataway. But here it was again, just extremely one-sided, not just with the foul calls, but with Michigan getting away with a blatant walk on that last possession before the timeout was called. I mean, it's just so bad, and it's infuriating, and it's needless. Like, why can't you just call the game as you see it and not have this sort of default mode for the home team? I just don't get it. I mean, do you see that in the leagues you cover?
Yeah, you know what? I would say this. I would say every league, it is very tough to win on the road, but you see it. Absolutely, I think you see it more in the Big Ten. You know, and I don't know if anyone's done anything with, you know, free throws, you know, who's shooting more and whatever, but I have a feeling you would see that in the Big Ten, that it would be higher than other leagues, because it certainly seems like that as you watch it.
And I do wonder, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, I do wonder if this is part of the reason why the Big Ten has underachieved in the NCAA tournament. You know, like the Big East, when the Big East went to the worst years in the NCAA tournament were like in the mid-90s, and they had a 6 foul rule in the Big East for a couple of years. Like, it was only in the Big East you had 6 fouls. And then what happened was the Big East teams got to the NCAA tournament and everybody was fouling out because it was a 5-foul rule in the NCAA tournament. They had played the whole season with 6 fouls. And so I wonder if, like, the way it's skewed officiating takes place in the Big Ten, does that hurt these teams when they get into that neutral setting and have refs that are outside of their league? I don't know. It's hard to really – this is conjecture, right? But it's very glaring the way that unfolds. So I wanted to just point that out. Rutgers is at Purdue, obviously a very tough game. And then they come home to play Minnesota to wrap up the regular season. And they could lose both and get into the Big Ten tournament. Winning one of those two would guarantee them getting in. Obviously, they need to get in. It would be really a colossal embarrassment if they did not get in. I suspect they will get in, and then we'll see what happens. But that's where we're at with Rutgers to Seton Hall now. And so really interesting week for Seton Hall. You know, they blew a big lead to Villanova at home and then went out to St. John's, and everyone kind of thought they were going to be the sacrificial lamb in this coronation of St. John's as the Big East champion. And to St. John's credit, they did wear the crown, and they have earned it. But Seton Hall made them work for it, and it was anybody's game until about 2 minutes left, 2.5 minutes left. St. John's won by 10, but it was really a 1 or 2 possession game the entire way. And Shaheen Holloway said afterwards, like, this is the team I thought I'd have all season. You know, they're mostly healthy. Chauncey Jenkins is still out. I don't think he's coming back with a knee injury, but they're mostly healthy and starting to play together. They had 17 assists, Steve. They played good team defense. Shah's like, this is the team I thought I'd have. Unfortunately, you know, it's March 3rd or whatever, 2nd, and you're 7-22.
Right. Nice. But I think what you see some usable pieces here you're starting to see. And so I think now it's a matter of building around that during the offseason. And I think that's kind of coming into focus now.
Yeah, this will be a subject for later, but like Godswill Ariarene is a freshman center. He's a Nigerian who only has like 3 or 4 years of organized basketball under his belt. And he played pretty well against Zuby Ejiofor. St. John's big man is one of the best centers in the country. You know, he dominated UConn inside. So there's a guy who you have a potential starting Big East center. And we know how hard it is to get centers in the portal. It's like the hottest position in the portal, centers and sharpshooters. And so, like, you got to hang on to this guy. And I suspect they will because, you know, I think he just hasn't put up the numbers really to draw a lot of attention on the market, so to speak. And I feel like he has a very good relationship with the staff, that especially Rasheem Davis, who brought him in from Long Island Lutheran. So I feel like they have a very good chance to retain him, and that should be a guy you can maybe build around. So will they keep Isaiah Coleman? The odds are less there. Obviously, he's a Big East caliber impact big man. And then we'll have to see who else they can build around. But yeah, you're starting to finally see what Shah envisioned. It's too late for this season. The last thing I wanted to mention is they have a senior night coming up Tuesday. I did write something about Dylan Adaiwusu, who's a 2-year guy, helped him win the NIT last year, has set a good tone. Like, you know, you saw them against Monmouth without him, Steve. Yeah. They had no toughness, no edge without him. You know, in the big blowout losses they've suffered, he wasn't on the court. So he's made a difference. But it brings I want to bring this up because senior night has historically been a very meaningful tradition. Like, we see it in high school where it still carries a lot of weight, a lot of meaning. The meaning is much less so now in college, Steve, because it's so rare to see someone come up in your program for 4 years, even 3 years. So you're honoring these seniors in senior night who maybe been in your program 1 or 2 years. Like St. John's was honoring Kadari Richmond. He's been there for like 9 months, you know? Right. And so, and the guys are being honored like 2 different times. You know, Richmond last year at Seton Hall and this year at St. John's. Now that'll probably end when these 50-year COVID year guys cycle out, thank goodness. But still, senior night is just a shell of what it was, Steve. I don't know if you see the same thing at the mid-major level, probably, right?
Oh, absolutely. I saw it the other night at Monmouth, you know, where it was, you know, 2 guys who have been there 1 year, you know, this is their only year. And you know, 1 guy who had been there 4 years, who's, you know, a reserve who hasn't played very much, but a scholarship player. But that was it. You know, it's such a transitional thing now. You're right. Senior night used to be about a kid who, you know, every fan in the arena had watched for 4 years develop, come from, you know, just trying to get playing time to becoming a factor for that team. And you just don't see that anymore.
It's sad, and it really is a loss. Like, I think it's a big loss for the sport. It's kind of like symbolizes what we've lost as college basketball has gone headlong into free agency. You know, the senior night at 20 that jumps out to me, the quintessential senior night was 2018 at Seton Hall when they had Angel Delgado and Kadeen Carrington and Desi Rodriguez and Ish Sinago. These are four guys who had invested 4 years into the program. They were in 3 NCAA tournaments, and they had won a Big East title. And Kevin Willard, who is not an overly emotional guy, he's a pretty clinical dude. He had tears rolling down his cheeks that night as he presented them with their framed jerseys. That was, I mean, the whole arena was misty. You could just feel it in the air, against Butler that night at the end of the 2018 season. That had deep meaning, not just for the players and their families and the coaches, but for the fans who were so connected, as you said, watching these guys grow up, being part of their growth from boys into men. And that's gone now. And it really is a shame. Even Rutgers 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when Geo Baker in 2022, Geo Baker, Ron Harper Jr., Caleb McConnell, that was another one. That's guys there were 4 and 5 year guys who are Rutgers men for life. They're going to be Rutgers men for life. They're going to come back in their old age with gray hair, and they're going to still get big ovations at the rack. And that was a big send-off. I remember Steve Peichel saying right before then, these guys are dinosaurs. They're dinosaurs. This will never happen again. He's correct. Rutgers is a senior night coming on Sunday, a senior day. And I'm assuming Jeremiah Williams will be an honoree. This is his second year there, and he's like the old man. He's only played a season and a half there, and he's like the old man in the program. And so that's just not what it was. It's just a weird dynamic, Steve, and it's sad what we've lost. So that'll be Seton Hall against Creighton Tuesday as the Pirates try to finish out the season strong and continue their player auditions for who can help them. And the portal is going to be opening before you know it, right? We're like 3 weeks away. So we'll spend some more time on that later in subsequent weeks on the podcast. I do want to mention St. John's winning its first Big East title in 40 years. Rick Pitino's quick resurrection of that program. And this is sort of the blueprint now, right? You get a coach who knows how to make different parts work, who can develop players quickly, and who has a lot of financial resources. Look, Indiana's got a lot of money. Arkansas's got a lot of money. They brought, Kansas State's got a lot of money. They brought in all this talent, as did Rick Pitino. Those coaches didn't know how to handle that talent, how to make it all get on the same page quickly. Pitino, maybe the greatest player development coach in the history of the game, does know how to do it, and that's been the difference for St. John, Steve.
Well, and he's got Mike Rapoli too, right? So,
right.
Everybody needs that guy right now. I've known Rapoli from horse racing. He's done an amazing job in that sport. And now, he's a St. John's alumni. Listen, that's the name of the game right now. And as you said, Pitino's got some money and he knows what to do with it.
Well, think about there's probably Mike Rapoli type of guys at Indiana and at Kansas State and at Arkansas. Think about it, they've been fleeced. I mean, think about them. They might as well have shoveled their dough into a fireplace, right? But Mike Rapoli knew his investment was going to bring a return because of who the head coach is. And so that's the difference. Like, you can't just throw cash at a roster. They still have to be coached. And so cash isn't the only solution. You have to have cash, but it's not the only solution. And like Pitino being the great coach that he is the other part of that. And I will say, it was super impressive to see, 19,000 people in Madison Square Garden for a college basketball game. Many of whom were wearing white. Pitino was wearing his white suit, his Godfather's suit. So it was an impressive sight and good for college basketball in the metro area and really good for the Big East, which is down this year and sort of needs. It's nice when the team in its biggest city can carry the torch in the NCAA tournament. That's a really good thing for the league, Steve. So we'll be watching that in the coming weeks, and maybe we'll see St. John's in the East Regional in Newark. I have a credential for that, so there'll be more time to talk about that later. Let's get into Monmouth, Abdi Bashir, and the CAA tournament. Where are we at, Steve, and Abdi Bashir's candidacy for Player of the Year, and what do you think of Monmouth's CAA tournament possibilities?
Well, I think just touching on Abdi first, I mean, he has had an incredible year, really one of the greatest years ever at Monmouth. He's sixth in the nation in scoring. He leads the country in three-pointers. He's got 121 already. So that's great. But I'm not sure he's going to get CAA Player of the Year. Ante Brzovic from Charleston, who is the preseason Player of the Year, he's top 3 in scoring and rebounding. His team is one of the best teams. Again, he's a first teamer last year. He's a senior. I have a feeling that's the direction they're going to go, but we'll see. Abdi's had a great year. And I think Monmouth, again, it's part of their climb in the CAA. Their first year in the CAA, they finished last. Last year, they were 8th. This year, they got the 6th seed. So, I mean, they're trending up. I think they have a puncher's chance, but I will say I think the top 2 teams, Towson and Wilmington, are really, really good, especially Towson. It's an anomaly. They have a lot of graduates that have all played together for a few years. They got them to all stay. They saw what happened in Nick Timberlake when he went to Kentucky and didn't play hardly at all. They all stayed. And, this is what happens. You get a good team. And so I think Monmouth can beat anyone. I think it will be very tough, though, to win that league.
Interesting. And good to see that at Towson, that sort of mentality still surviving somewhere. We'll keep an eye on that. Of course, we'll be covering the CAA tournament. Princeton, disappointing, right? With Princeton, Steve, they're 7-6 in the Ivy League. Their best case scenario, if they beat Penn on Saturday, by the way, they've beaten Penn 13 straight times, 12 straight times. If they beat Penn again on Saturday, they will be the 4th seed in the Ivy League tournament, and they'll have to play Yale, which has throttled them twice in the semis. In an ideal world, they could avoid Yale in the semis, let someone else try to knock them off. Now they have to go head on against Yale, assuming they get in, which they probably will. If they lose to Penn, they could still back in. But, this was the preseason favorite to win the league. It just doesn't seem like they've been able to recover from Cade Pierce's injury. When you're driven by 2 guys and one of them's not himself, the margin for error is small in the sport, and that's what has happened to the Tigers.
Yeah, and I think you could see it right from early in the season that this was not the same team, and Caden Pierce didn't look like the same player. So, it is what it is. The Ivy League, as we see every year, is so ultra competitive.
Yeah.
If you slip up, you're gonna fall.
Hard to see Princeton winning that tournament when they've been beaten badly by Yale and Cornell. And so that's why they play the game. So we'll see about that. FDU opens the Northeast Conference tournament at home in a quarterfinal Wednesday against Stonehill, who they've handled twice in the regular season. Terrence Brown, who's been a guest of ours on Jersey Jump Shot, I think he's got the inside track at winning Northeast Conference Player of the Year. He's averaging 20 points a game. He's done it all for them, been super consistent, much improved sophomore guard. If FDU takes care of business at home in the quarterfinal, then they go to most likely will wind up at Central Connecticut State, who's really been the team in that league this year, right? And that's Patrick Sellers, who's on Steve Peichel's coaching tree, has done a great job there. That program was really down when he took over, and that's the road for Monmouth. FDU's been competitive with everybody in their league except Central Connecticut, and that's who they would have to play in the semi most likely, Steve. So, but Terrence Brown is a Player of the Year candidate, and if you follow FDU, you got to like the way Jack Castleberry has sort of taken the torch from Tobin Anderson. They're still pretty good and still got a chance in that league, which is what you want if you're the Knights.
Yeah, and listen, in a league like that, if you have the best player in the league, you got a chance every night. And so I think it would be great to see FDU go back, and I think they got a chance.
We'll keep an eye on them. And then I want to just go off the track a little bit to mention the Seton Hall women's basketball team, which finished 3rd in the Big East. They really took care of business against everybody in the league they could beat. They're having a 20-win season, and they're going into the Big East tournament now as a 3 seed. But the thing is, Steve, that they're on the outside looking in from a bracketology standpoint, and they haven't really had a bad loss. They did lose a non-conference game to Princeton, a very close game, and Princeton's good. Princeton's also on the bubble, so it's the thing about the Big East in women's basketball is it's only projected to be a 2-bid league. It's UConn, and then there's the big gap. Then there's Creighton, which is a good team, and it's like looking like an 8-9 seed. And then there's the Pirates and Marquette are like on the outside looking in right now. And that's a tough spot. If you're Tony Bozzella, like you've done everything that you could pretty much. and you're still on the outside looking in. You got to make a run in the Big East tournament, and that's a tough spot for a league that is so known for being a basketball league. To only be a 2-bid league is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, I think you look at what Seton Hall has done this year, and you've got to be really optimistic about this program. And listen, can they get to that point where they can be an at-large team in the coming years? I think they can. And so it's nice to see.
And the Jersey Shore's own Faith Massonis has been a huge part of this, right? She's the graduate. She's sort of the leader of the team, grad transfer from Maryland. This was the missing piece for them. Really good player, a really good leader, and then you need both of those things, right? And so Tony has we'll talk with him later in the week about this. Tony has invested his limited NIL resources very wisely here. He has found like the right, and Andy Toole mentioned this, you got to find the right fit in post-grad players, like not just on the court, but off the court. And Faith Massonis, the pride of Manasquan, has been every bit of that for Seton Hall women's basketball, and the biggest reason why they've become so much improved this year. I want to just mention the Division III NCAA tournament, Steve. The bracket comes out today, and I think there's going to be 5 New Jersey teams in it. So for as brutal a year as it's been for the Division I men's basketball, it has been that good on the Division III level. The projection, I didn't even realize it was D3. Did you know there was D3 bracketology?
I didn't.
There's a Brad Wachtel in D3.
Listen, we're going to have to do a D3 show, boy.
Maybe at this rate. I mean, we're going to continue at the end of March. I am going to write something this week. We have multiple stories coming, but we have Stockton, which won. Sorry, not Stockton. Montclair State, which beat Ramapo in a thrilling overtime NJAC final. Both those teams are going. They're loaded with Jersey high school stars on their rosters, and it looks like TCNJ is probably going to get an at-large bid. And then Drew, of course. Drew went 18-0 in their conference, the Landmark Conference. They won the conference tournament 20-0 against their league competition. They'll be in there too. And so the Jersey college basketball at the D3 level has been good for a long time. It's nice to see that spotlight going to be on them the next few weeks for sure. I'm not going to rule out, Steve, the possibility of us having a D3 guest on Jersey Jump Shot as we look for anyone with local ties who's having success. So that was Andy Toole this week. We thank him for coming on. We'll keep an eye on him down the road, and you stay with us as we now continue. It's March. There will be madness, and we'll be back on the Jersey Jump Shot.